Republicans on Capitol Hill are plowing forward with their agenda despite the impacts of yesterday's snowstorm on Washington. And this weekend, many of them will be heading down to where it's a bit warmer, Mar-a-Lago, to meet with President-elect Trump. What might we see unfold in the days ahead? Well, here to discuss is Congressman Kevin Hern, the chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee, which serves as the advisory committee to the House Republicans. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Oklahoma. Congressman Hern, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Great to be with you, Tony.
Happy New Year to you. Hope you're staying warm.
It's a little snowy here in D.C., but it's very nice, very pretty.
So let's talk about some of the items on the Republicans' plate this week. Let's start first with reconciliation. Yesterday and again today in the president's press conference talked about whether or not there'll be one or two reconciliation bills. What are we looking at?
Well, here's what we don't disagree on at all, and that's all the policies, the border policies, the energy policies, making sure our military is strong, making sure our tax policies are not increased on all Americans and businesses across America, that we continue this ability to limit the size of the federal government. The president came out Sunday night and wanted one big, beautiful bill. That's what we intend to deliver on the House side. On the Senate side, there's still some questions about can we move quickly enough? So the president, as he stated today, said, he'd really rather have one big bill and get it all done at one time. But if it took two, then he would certainly look at that. And that's part of the reason he wants to get everybody down to Mar-a-Lago and out of D.C. to listen to the concerns and do what a good business guy does, take all the input and then make the final decision.
So two bills, only half as beautiful?
Well, we'd like one big, beautiful bill on the House side. We have a very narrow margins of, votes and much less than what the Senate has actually for the first time in a long time. So Speaker Johnson and the people involved in this process on the House side understand what we need to do to get a bill passed. And we think one bill is the way to go.
So take just a moment. Let's explain to our viewers and listeners. I've done this before, but this is pretty deep into the weeds in Washingtonese, talking about a reconciliation. This is goes back to the 1974 Budget Act, which allows policy-related items that have budgetary impact to be addressed in such a way that it does not require the supermajority in the Senate. A simple majority vote in the Senate allows this to go forward. Correct?
Correct. It was a process put in place in 1974. I would argue sort of as a fail-safe that if you couldn't get the budget done, the appropriations done, then you had a way to actually do it, sort of an alternative pathway that was even more restrictive, more difficult, very narrow, no policy changes that you'd normally get in a budgetary process. So it's really about, as you said, had budget impact. And then, it's really about how do you get around the 60-vote filibuster rule in the Senate, so the simple majority in the Senate. So it takes a lot of coordination between the House and the Senate. And at the end of the day, it's the parliamentarian on the Senate side that really controls, the integrity of the reconciliation bill. So you have to work very quickly. You have to work very earnestly in making sure it's correct. And then you make sure the policies in there meet the criteria that the parliamentarian says, and then you get it on the floor. And you can move rather quickly. We'd like to have it done by Memorial Day.
What are the policy with budgetary implications, obviously? What policies are we looking at in the reconciliation bill or bills?
Well, you'd like to get some pay-fors, and you'd like to make sure everybody has something that they can vote on as the president's team and the president has said in many meetings that I've been involved in, none of us in these tight majorities are going to ever get everything that we want. So we try to create a bill that everybody can get something that makes them feel like they've achieved their representation of their constituents back home. But, border security is one, making sure that we can save money there with implications on what we've been spending to offset the housing of illegal immigrants, shipping them all over the country. One thing we've understood in the Biden administration, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing that. Energy policy, unleashing the energy production in the United States, huge revenue generators for the federal government, for the federal treasuries. And then certainly the tax policy. When you looked at 2017, the Trump tax cuts were done under reconciliation. I think it's also worth noting that when you do reconciliation, it's not necessary because you can get bipartisan reconciliation bills, but generally speaking, they're partisan. So on the House side, it would be necessary to have all Republicans, so you couldn't lose but one. And then on the Senate side, you need the 51% vote. So, it's real challenging, but it can be done. All the big moves in Congress in the last 30 years have been done. Actually, the last time this happened in a big way, and it was very meaningful, was under President Clinton. And the first time with President Clinton and Newt Gingrich when we got a balanced budget. So a lot of opportunity, and I feel good that we're going to do it. We're going to move as quickly as possible.
Congressman Hern, let's talk just a moment about that narrow margin, because the legacy media would like for us to believe that there is great disunity among the Republicans in the House, the Republican conference. Can you speak to that?
It's interesting you say that. I actually just told a group of media reporters, I've been here 6 years. I've probably never seen the Republican Party more unified than it is today. We have no agreements or disagreements on the policies. The only narrow, eye that we could look at right now would be to look at how we're going to do the process. But when you look at the policies, border policies, energy policies, plussing up our military to regain our national security posture and securing our tax cuts that we have from 2017, we're all in agreement on that. I think when you see what happened with, the mandate that President Trump got with the vote, the electoral vote, the popular vote, yes, Speaker Johnson had to, go talk to two of our members, friends, to get some assurances that they needed. But we got it done in the first round ballot. And you contrast that to 2 years ago. It took 15 rounds and a speaker race in the middle of all that. The Republican Party is very united. I've talked to people who've been around here a long time, very united. So we're looking forward to getting President Trump's 100-day agenda going and getting the reconciliation package and getting America safe and secure and low taxes.
I just want to put, highlight what you said, that there is agreement on the policies. It's the tactics or the way we get there. And that's understandable because everybody has their own ideas on things. But you do have a pretty unified conference when it comes to the big ticket items of what is important. And one of those items you've been very good about talking about with your business background, it's one that is increasingly a concern to many Americans that are paying attention, is the debt. Our nation's debt that is ticking up rapidly. What are we going to do about that?
Well, it is a grave concern. And one of the drivers of that now in mandatory spending is our ever-growing interest rate on the debt, the massive debt. We have $36 trillion in debt, so every 1% that increases on an annual basis, that's $360 billion more. We're now spending more on interest on our debt than we are our military. We've got to curtail spending. When you look at the revenues as a percentage of GDP over the last 20 years, it's hovered around 18, 19, 20%. But when you look at spending has gone from 18, 19% to 25, 26%. So we've spent $8 trillion in the last 4 years. And then when you talk to people that are adverse to cutting, they can't seem to find any way to cut any money. And so, it's one of those things where we all do need to come together. I fear at the end of the day, the bond market's going to control what we ultimately end up doing when they control what they're willing to pay, we're willing to give us for debt as far as the interest rate goes. And it's going to come to a screeching halt. But we have an opportunity on reconciliation to look at some of this that, what could be some revenue drivers to offset some of these costs, and we'll do so.
Final question, just following up on that. We just have about a minute left. Are you optimistic that we are going to trim government with the Department of Government Efficiency? Do you think we're going to find those areas where it begin to trim some government spending and bring it under control?
I do. It's going to take somebody outside of the Congress to do it. And I think you're going to see with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and the DOGE work that they're going to do is cut down on the need that these agencies have to have authorized and appropriated. That's where it's going to start. And we've got a long ways to go. Government is out of control on its size. I believe that the real work in America is done at the local level. And that's the way our country was designed. And this group of fine men are going to make that happen.
Congressman Kevin Hern, thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate your insight and input.
Thanks, Tony.